Morning, Chairman. Chairman, you're on mute.
Good morning and welcome to this online meeting of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Bob Adams and I am Chairman of the committee. The audio feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website. I'd like to welcome the members of the press and public who are listening to this online. Before we begin, could I ask Democratic Services Officer Steve Blagg to confirm the members present, please? Steve?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I've just lost my list, Chairman, so it might be slightly out of alphabetical order, but if members can respond accordingly. Councillor Bob Adams?
Present.
Councillor Brewis?
Present.
Councillor Bowkett?
Present.
Councillor Ashton?
Present.
Councillor Brockway?
Present.
Councillor Grocott?
Present.
Councillor Stokes?
Present.
Councillor Strengle?
Present.
Councillor Renshaw?
Present.
And Councillor Whittington?
Present.
And Councillor Perrotton Williams, the Executive Support Councillor, Chairman. I think that's... I do apologise, Chairman, for that. I just lost my...
Not a problem. We've just...
Mr. Chairman, if I just might say, I'm here as well.
Yeah, I noticed Councillor Davies has arrived on the scene as well, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So I welcome all the officers to the meeting and ask that you introduce yourselves at the beginning of your item on the agenda when you make your presentation. I would like to ask members of the committee and other participants to type "speak" in the chat when you wish to ask a question or make a contribution. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. Please can you keep questions and contributions succinct and concise. And also just a reminder, please turn off your camera and microphone when not participating in the meeting. Can I also ask that members who are intending to leave the meeting indicate using the chat function? Officers do not need to do this. So we'll now move on to the formal part of the agenda, please. Apologies for absence and replacement members. Steve, please.
I haven't received any, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Declarations of members' interests, please. I'll take that then as none other than those recorded in the Register of Interest.
Mr. Chairman, sorry,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, I was a bit slow. I need to declare an interest in item 5, and I'll be leaving the meeting for that item.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Can we move on to item 3 on the agenda, please? Minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of December. This item is to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record. I propose to go through every page. I'm taking it as read that members have read the minutes. Could I ask for a proposer and a seconder, please?
Happy to propose it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. And I see Councillor Brewis indicated he would second them. Thank you.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Could we go to a roll call vote, please, on the minutes?
Certainly can, Chairman. Just on the line, please. Right, members. Roll call coming up. Councillor Bob Adams.
4.
Councillor Stephen Rowe.
4.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Wendy Bowkett.
4.
Councillor Chris Brewis.
4.
Councillor Jackie Brockway.
4.
Councillor Rodney Grocott.
4.
Councillor Robin Renshaw.
4.
Councillor Adam Stokes.
4.
Councillor Eddie Strengle,
4.
Councillor Mark Whittington.
4.
That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So those minutes are agreed. Can we move on to item 4, please? Announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillor and Lead Officers. I have not got any announcement to make. Can I move on to Councillor Davis and Councillor Perrotton Williams? Councillor Davis. Morning, Richard.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, committee. Nothing specific to announce this morning, other than I just wanted to make members aware of the inclement weather we've been suffering for the last 3 or 4 days, and to say teams have been working round the clock, not only dealing with flooding issues, but in the south of the county, as I'm sure you're aware, Chairman, we've seen not inconsiderable snowfall, particularly roads around Grantham a couple have been blocked for a period. So the teams are active dealing with it. Just to pay tribute to them, thanking them for their hard work, and just to ask members of the public to take extra care when travelling. And if you could pass that on to your residents, that'd be most useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. I'm sure we all endorse the comments you've made about the effort being put in by the staff. Thank you for that. Cleo, any additional comments?
No, just to echo what Richard's already said.
Councillor Whittington has asked to speak, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Mark?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I was just out walking my dogs earlier this morning. Very close to my walk is one of the big green LCC grit bins that we have, obviously, around the county. And somebody has actually gone in there and has actually put some grit, a member of the public has, on a very, very sort of quite tight road junction. So I'm just wondering if we could just make the public as well aware that there are these grit bins out there that members of the public can use for both roads, well, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Can we now move on to any announcements from lead officers? Karen, please.
No announcements to make, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to item 5, revenue and capital budget proposals? This is in the hands of Keith Noyland, please.
Good morning. As the Chairman's already said, this report presents the budget proposals for the next financial year. On pages 11 to 14 of the pack, I've provided the context in terms of the 2020 spending review and provisional local government settlement. I won't go through that in any detail, but as expected, the spending review was pretty much a rollover of existing arrangements rather than a more fundamental review, largely due to the pandemic. And with continuing delay to the local government funding reforms, we're again presenting a budget for just 1 year due to the uncertainty in future years. The Executive approved the budget proposals, of which this forms part, for consultation at their meeting on the 5th of January. Those proposals include a proposed 1.99% increase in council tax. The proposed revenue budgets for highways and transport services are presented at table A at the bottom of page 13 of your pack. The table shows the movements from the current year's budgets in terms of pay inflation, cost pressures and savings. And as you'll see, the changes from the current year are relatively small. Given the expectation of public sector pay restraint, the £71,000 allowed for pay inflation is effectively just budgets catching up with the higher than budgeted pay award for the current year. No further pay inflation has been allowed for in 21-22. The cost pressure of £300,000 relates to increased energy costs for street lighting and signs, and the £159,000 saving results from the switch to buying rather than leasing gritters. It's important to stress that during the current year, a number of services have significantly been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, and the resulting increases in costs have been funded by government grant. These proposals for 21-22 are based on the assumption that any continuing impacts from the pandemic will similarly be grant funded. Moving on to capital budgets, table B on page 15 sets out the proposed capital programme. The most significant changes for these services relate to the emergence of risks on the major highway schemes, the Lincoln Eastern Bypass, Grantham Southern Relief Road, and Spalding Western Relief Road. The capital programme has been updated in order to fund these forecast increases, but I would emphasise that they are based on forecast costs and are therefore still subject to change. To ensure the affordability of the programme, the as yet uncommitted budgets for Boston developments and the coastal highway pinch point schemes have been rephased into later years. In terms of timescales for the budget process, a consultation meeting with local business representatives is scheduled to take place on the 28th of January. The proposals are now on the council website, so provide the opportunity for public comment. The executive meets on the 2nd of February to determine the final budget proposals, which will then be considered by full council on the 19th of February. Hopefully that summarises the main points, so I'll stop there for questions.
Thank you, Keith. Members of committee, comments or questions, please. Steve?
Councillor Renshaw, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Renshaw? Robin?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that although I support most of what's the budget, it's a very succinct document and quite helpful to members to go through it. Obviously, because we will be putting an alternative budget at the full council meeting, I will abstain from voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Vice Chairman, any further member wishing to comment or ask questions?
The Vice Chairman's excluded from this part, Chairman.
Sorry, I think...
No, he's excluded, Chairman. He left the meeting.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch all that.
The Vice Chairman indicated that he would leave the meeting on this item, Chairman.
Oh, he did, didn't he? I beg your pardon.
Yeah. Councillor Whittington, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Whittington, Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to thank Keith and his team for a very, as Councillor Renshaw said, a very succinct and good report. I hope members find it interesting and informative. I think it's particularly well written as an accountant. And just really a comment. Just want to thank Keith and his team for such a easy to read document. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Steve, any further member wishing to speak or ask questions?
No more speakers, Chairman. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ashton has just indicated, Chairman. Beg your pardon.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Ashton, Tom, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just to speak generally in support of the paper, and to say when you find it, note that the conclusion that these budget proposals reflect the level of government funding expected to be available to the council, and a proposal to increase general council tax by 1.99%. In my neck of the woods, people are keener to complain about work that haven't been done rather than they are ever object to a small increase in overall council tax. And I'd say that most of the parishes that I deal with on a regular basis would be more than happy with that any increase go towards continuing the work that we're doing on the road. So more than happy to support it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Steve, any further members wishing to speak? Steve Blank, no further member wishing to speak?
No other Chairman. Nobody else. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So committee actions were to make comments on the highway, transport and revenue capital budget proposals, which we have done. I don't think there's anything that we need to take forward to the executive member. So can I propose that the committee support the budget proposals? And I think, could I have a seconder just for the record?
Seconded, Chairman. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Jackie. We're not asked to take a formal vote on this, Steve, are we? Just for any member who is not happy to support the proposals to indicate in the chat box, please.
Yes, please, Chairman. If somebody indicates against, Chairman, then, I mean, obviously Councillor Renshaw has abstained.
Yeah.
Apart from that, Chairman, everybody else seems to be in agreement.
Thank you very much indeed. Can we now move on to item 6, please? Highway fees and charges annual review. Mick Phoenix, please.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. It's a quick rundown through the review that we've carried out of fees and charges, a process we started back in 2019. And this is the second year of review for those charges. The measures are basically designed to ensure that we remain within a robust financial structure. It's asked that the committee note the content of the report and comment as required. The council has always charged for a number of services. However, over a period of about 10 years or so, we kind of stagnated with those charges during the kind of the years where austerity was affecting the ability for councils to put prices up. Following the review, we started to increase charges in line with inflation costs, both for staffing and materials and resources. The table shows the current charges for the various items that the council charges for. Some of these items we can only charge what it costs the council, but for others, discretionary, we can charge what it costs plus a reasonable sum to be able to reinvest back into the highway service. And that's been built into these figures as well.
Overall, have you come back into the meeting? Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay. Overall, the increases in general are 5%, which is based on inflation plus wage inflation and other resource costs such as design work. There are some notes that you can see on the right-hand side of the table. At the beginning, about March 2020, we started a new contract for the advertising of road closures. That contract has gone extremely well, and the cost of advertising has been reduced considerably by regions of 30 to 40%. However, we can only charge exactly what it costs us to advertise. We're not allowed to add a charge in. However, the bonus is that we do pass those savings on, not only to ourselves, because for our own works we still have to advertise, but also for utility firms, the cost of advertising for them is reduced markedly as well. So hopefully, if the chain continues, customer prices should also come down as well to some extent. Section 184s are effectively, we use them within the council for drop curbs. So if people want to convert their front gardens into a parking space. However, what we have noticed recently is that Section 184s have been used for more complicated works, requiring a lot more design element. So we have made the charging regime for Section 184s more flexible, as shown in Note A underneath the table. This allows us to be able to scope the work out so that if we're looking at something such as a culvert crossing, which is a lot more complex than just a simple drop curb, we can examine each job individually and price up accordingly. It gives the council more flexibility and it helps recover their costs. The two outliers for charges are two of the charges which are playing catch up, which weren't increased for many, many years. And that's base suspensions and parking waivers. And they've gone up by 50%. This puts them much more in line with what we see with our near neighbours. And it also puts them in line with the higher rate of charging in, say, City of Lincoln, which is where the bulk of the base suspensions and parking waivers are asked for, and aligns it more with their parking fees for 24 hours. So it takes away that option of getting extremely cheap parking by applying for a parking waiver. And it also helps to cover some of the costs for cancellations. When a waiver or base suspension is cancelled, we refund. However, the refund can cost anything between £20 and £30 for the council to process. So again, we're moving towards covering that cost as well. In conclusion, the council continues to look at prices and adjust accordingly to ensure that the council covers its costs and raises a reasonable amount of money to be able to reinvest back into services. I'm happy to take any questions.
Microphone, Bob. Microphone, Bob.
Thank you, Steve. The members were asked to consider the report and to determine whether it supports the recommendation of the executive committee and whether we wish to add any.
Sorry, Bob. I have two people wishing to speak.
Yeah, I'm aware of. Yeah, okay, Steve. And whether we agree any additional comments to be passed to the executive. So can we move on to the members who wish to speak, please? Yes, Steve.
Councillor Whittington first.
Thank you. Councillor Whittington. Mark, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to again just thank Mick for the report and the presentation. And for me, it's sort of obviously after years of not increasing, obviously, you know, it's probably it's high time to get a review. I just got one question, which may be just the way I'm reading the table, but on page 22, the table that starts on page on the third and fourth items down, road closure over 5 days and road closure up to 5 days. We've got the current charges, an increase of 5%, and then in the charge from 1st of April 21, a lot lower charges than obviously. So I'm not entirely sure what's happened there. Everything else is looks to be a 5% increase, but that is just I'm finding it a bit confusing. Maybe there's wondering if somebody could just explain that. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you, Mark. Mick, do you want to respond?
No problem, Councillor. It's a new form of mathematics. No, I'm joking. It's this division between officer and resource time and the advertising cost. The pre-2020 advertising costs were almost double what we're paying now. So if you split the charge into two elements, you have the officer time and resources, which have gone up by the percentage, but the advertising costs can only be charged as it costs us with the advertising firm. Because those costs have come down so much, although we've put the prices up by 5%, they've dramatically reduced because the advertising cost to the customer has absolutely plummeted. But the officer and resource element has been increased by the 5%. It's clunky, and I wish there was a way that I could get round it otherwise, but we must show the advertising costs as is, and we have to charge accordingly, and that's legally mandated. We're not allowed to do it in any other way. But yes, I recognise that the figures look weird.
Okay, thanks, Mick. Thanks for that. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Mark. Steve.
Councillor Brockway.
Councillor Brockway, Jackie, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's on page 23, and it's about the cafe licensing. I noticed that the cost for a license goes up enormously according to the size of the cafe. And yet, on page 24, it says that the charge is because of administration and officer expertise. So what greater expertise and administration jobs are there that require such a massive increase in charge for larger cafes? I'd have thought that the task would be the same, just with different numbers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jackie. Mick?
Thank you, councillors. Yes, basically it's down to the amount of the highway that's going to be affected and the knock-on effects. So if it's four chairs around a table, relatively easy to look at, quite straightforward for the highways officers to go and examine that. When we start talking about bigger numbers, and especially over 50, there's a lot of the highway that's going to be affected, and that will directly have knock-on effects onto things like traffic management, traffic flows, pedestrian accesses, and that's why it increases. It basically is down to an increased number of inspections and a higher level of design work that would need to go into making sure that the licence is actually fit for purpose.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Steve, any further member?
No further members looking to speak.
Chairman, I did put in the chat, Councillor Renshaw.
Councillor Renshaw. Robin, then, please.
Thank you. Well, I too, like Mark, read the papers, and I noticed that there was that arithmetical error there. Just a suggestion, in that column there where it says 5%, next to it might be an idea just to put a line through it, and then the note on the right would tally up, and as it's a public document, it would stand up, and also on the next line as well, if I might just suggest that. But I do welcome for businesses a reduction. It's very helpful for businesses, except the one in Lincoln where we had a contractor doing a major development which caused major disruption to the city traffic flow at a time when a lot of other roadworks were going on in the city. So it did cause massive extra congestion. So it is a pity in some ways that we can't bill the contractors for that. But certainly it does help businesses that's got this high cost, because when they're doing major developments which benefits everybody in the long term, it's to be welcomed. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. No, if there's no further member wishing to speak or ask any questions, so we are being asked to support the recommendation in this report, which I'm happy to propose. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. So we go to a recorded vote on this one, please. Steve Black.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Right. Councillor Bob Adams.
For.
Councillor Stephen Rowe.
For.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Wendy Bowkett.
For.
Councillor Chris Brewis.
For.
Councillor Jackie Brockway.
For.
Councillor Rodney Grocock.
For.
Councillor Robin Renshaw.
For.
Councillor Adam Stokes.
For.
Councillor Eddie Strengle.
For.
Councillor Mark Whittington.
For.
That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, members. So we now move on to item 7, the Road Safety Partnership Annual Report, which is in the hands of Steve Batchelor, please. Morning, Steve.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. It was suggested that because there's quite a lot of information in the report, it might be beneficial to share the screen. So with permission, I'll try my rudimentary IT skills.
Yes, fine. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Is everybody able to see this on my screen now?
I think so, Steve.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I've done a few site visits with councillors, but never invited a whole bunch into my bedroom. So this is quite a new experience for me, as I'm sure it is for you as well. I've tried to include quite a bit of information because I'm conscious this is the first time I've reported to this committee, and we can refine it in future if required. But I'll start by going through some of the key points on the document, and happy to take any questions that you might have. So at the beginning of the report, I just give a little bit of background, a little bit of history and information with regards to this topic. One of the points that's been noted before was in relation to 1.3 and the total cost to public services identified where people are involved in collisions and fatalities. That information is in the link in 1.2 above if anybody would like to see more about how that those figures are put together. So as we move through the document, section 2 is about some of the guidance and the national papers that help to guide us in what we do in terms of our activity. And in section 3, I talk a little bit more about what type of information we're using locally. The vast majority of our data analysis is based around Stats 19s, which is where the police officers at the scene of a collision fill in the information. That was always always done in paper format until recent years, and we've transferred over to electronic reporting from devices. What happened through that process is that the number of serious collisions that have been reported in Lincolnshire has increased and the number of slights decreased. The reason for that, and it's occurred in every force area where they've moved over to electronic recording, is in essence we're getting more accurate recording now. So previously what might have occurred on site is that a police officer will look at a collision and to all intensive purposes it appears to be a relatively minor collision and will be put down as a slight. However, all of the sections now in the electronic form is predefined. So if you were to put down that somebody had a broken little finger, for example, that would automatically be classified as a serious. Now, that's a good thing. It means that we're getting absolute accuracy, whereas before there might have been an element of opinion in there. However, it does make it more difficult on a national and local basis to make comparisons between what had occurred previously and what we're seeing now. So it's just a note of caution in terms of the figures. Now, what our data is showing us in Lincolnshire, as you might expect, is that the vast majority of people who are killed or seriously injured, those collisions are occurring on the rural part of the road network. The casualties are more likely to be male than they are female. Collisions are distributed fairly evenly throughout the county. We do see most of the problems and most of our vulnerable road users collisions occurring pretty much everywhere, but the highest percentage is in East Lindsey. And the highest risk groups for us in terms of those involved in collisions are two-wheeled motor vehicle riders of any category. So that can be low-powered or high-powered motor vehicles, young drivers between the ages of 17 to 24, and mature road users of above 60 years. But I've also noted here that pedestrian collisions have been occurring over the last couple of years, although the numbers are slightly smaller. So on to the next page and the casualty figures. You can see that the number of fatal collisions does fluctuate. It has varied. In 2019 it was 54, and I can tell you that in 2020 it was 52, so again a slight decrease. One difference we have seen in 2020, directly related to the efforts that have been put in to try and control coronavirus, is that there have been less people killed and injured overall. So by the end of November 2020, the number of people killed and seriously injured was 380, and as you can see, for the year in 2019 it was 480 plus the 54 fatalities, so 534 in total. So over the coming weeks we will get the final figures for the end of 2020, but I'm sure we will be seeing quite a significant decrease. Moving on to the next page, the charts and the tables are just outlining what I've just discussed previously. So I'll keep moving forwards. So I'll just give you a little bit about the key areas in which the Road Safety Partnership are trying to tackle the issues that we have on the roads, and a little bit of background about the partnership. So currently the members of the Road Safety Partnership are the Police and Crime Commissioner, Lincolnshire Police, the County Council, Highways England, Fire and Rescue Service and the East Midlands Ambulance Service. The partnership was the first in the country to co-locate everybody in the same building. That includes the forensic collision investigation teams, casualty reduction, education training and publicity officers, road safety officers in schools, accident investigation and prevention engineers, fire and rescue staff and resources, and also enforcement through the safety camera teams. So the key thing that we have in terms of accountability, as well as coming, of course, to overview and scrutiny and committees, is that I manage the Road Safety Partnership, supported by a management team from those organisations I've just outlined, and I report to the Road Safety Partnership Board, which is a combination of elected members and senior officers from the partnership organisations on a quarterly basis. So every year in March, we will get together and I will highlight the data and the information we have, and give recommendations as to what I consider to be the priorities based on that information and data, and that is approved by the board, and then we put our initiatives into place to try and target those issues that we've highlighted. So our priorities at this current time, up to the end of March, and if I'm honest, they don't vary dramatically. Vulnerable road users tend to stay vulnerable, and so we are going to see them overrepresented, but they are young drivers, mature drivers, two-wheel motor vehicle users, pedal cyclists, pedestrians, and also business users. there's a bit there about the structure of the partnership and who we have working there at the current time. But the key areas of business for us in terms of engineering is assessing over 50 sites in depth, but over 1,000 every year, to look at clusters and see whether or not there's any action that we think we can take in terms of relatively minor but high impact engineering schemes. We do a wide range of safety audits for schemes that have been completed elsewhere within the county, and the engineering team also help with our community speedwatch initiative and getting out the signs into safe places, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. In terms of enforcement, we manage and operate the safety camera program within the Road Safety Partnership. That includes the average speed cameras, the fixed speed cameras and the mobile speed cameras. But we also do an awful lot of linking and liaising with Lincolnshire Police's wider enforcement, be that roads policing team, neighbourhood policing teams, etc. And also we try and assist with specific campaigns. So, for example, Operation Octane, which is the police response to motorcycle fatalities and danger and risk associated with that type of vehicle. So we'll play a significant role in that. Community Speedwatch scheme in Lincolnshire now has 256 members and parishes involved. There's 3 elements to the scheme now. We had 2 for a long time, but we added the 3rd in recent years. So there are passive speed limit reminder signs. You may well have seen the yellow back signs that we put up, and that can be moved around the parish to try and give an extra warning to motorists that the speed limit is in place and that they need to slow down. We also have vehicle activated speed warning signs, which again can be moved from location to location within a parish and sometimes shared between parishes, so that they can again have an impact on the speed of vehicles in their community. And the most recent update was the volunteer speed monitoring groups, of which we've recently had the 50th active group starting, which is extremely positive. In that, a group of volunteers will monitor the speeds of vehicles as they're going through the village, and where it's identified that they are above the limit, Lincolnshire Police will then contact them through a letter, or if they've had a number of incidents recorded, then that can lead to a visit from a member of the neighbourhood policing team to have a conversation with those individuals about that type of behaviour. We do an awful lot of education and training and publicity. One of the biggest pieces of work we have is delivering the National Driver Offender Retraining Scheme, so things such as the speed awareness courses. We've got a wide range of courses, and we do in excess of 15,000 clients every year. We think that type of education is really important because for some people, their entire driving career, they may have no interaction after they've passed their test with anybody with regards to road safety. So where somebody has exceeded the speed limit by a sort of relatively low amount, for us to have 3 or 4 hours of their time and to be able to put across some of the issues that we think are really important and can increase safety is I think a really good opportunity for us. We do again a lot of work and training around motorcycles, so our Performance Plus event that happens at Cadwell Park and is extremely popular. And we also do some on-bike training. We've just brought back Bike Safe. We was able to get a couple of courses operating in September, but of course that has been paused for the moment with the current situation, and we'll look to start that again in the new year. But we also do our Smart Rider program, where we have one of our police staff members go out one-to-one with some individuals and try and assist them at being the safest rider they possibly can. We continue to do a lot of physical training up at our Scampton driver training facility, things like using the skid cars and the crash car simulators, generally around managing occupational road risk, which is working with businesses, but also with young, new and inexperienced drivers. We also deliver a mileage for life course for mature drivers, which is free, and the first part of that is in the classroom, and the second part is in the car, and again we find that we get really good feedback from that process as well. One of the challenges for us is how we can expand that and get more and more people onto that course, because again I think with mature drivers being considered to be a vulnerable road user, and with an aging population in this county, it's really important that we can assist people as much as we possibly can. We'll do quite a significant number of road safety communications campaigns throughout the years, targeting some of the key problems that we face in the county, including drink and drug drive, motorcycle safety, the fatal four around key offending behaviour or vehicle maintenance issues. We also work throughout the winter months on the issues that people will be facing at this time of year. But mobile phones, seatbelts, child safety, there's a wide range of things that we'll be involved with. Everything within the Road Safety Partnership is undertaken with evaluation in mind. So it's about being data-led, ensuring that we're targeting the right people and the right issues that we face in the county. We also do a lot of work in schools, delivering education both to primary and secondary schools. We've got a range of different packages that we can tailor to suit the needs of the pupils in their different communities. We also do Too Fast Too Soon, which is a Prince Michael award-winning theatre production that we do in schools. It's a custom-made sixth-form package, engaging with the audience and getting them to try and think about some of the key problems they're going to be facing at that risky time, as I've already identified, between the ages of 17 to 24. So over the last couple of years, we average about 13,000 pupils that we're able to directly engage with across primary, secondary and sixth form education. Section 8, just a basic outline of the budget that we have within the Road Safety Partnership on an annual basis. And just a few notes about the challenges of the last year. The main one was with regard to the National Driver Offender Retraining schemes. So every single one of our courses were delivered in classrooms. So for speed awareness, for example, that was 20 up to 24 clients in a room. And of course, that hasn't been able to occur since March. So in a relatively short period of time, digital versions of all of those courses were created by UK Road, who run them on a national basis. And that meant a lot of work internally within the Road Safety Partnership to get the technology and the IT in place, to get the trainers trained up themselves so they could work in this entirely new environment. And now we deliver online courses to up to 8 people at a time, and we're getting really positive feedback. Now, of course, if you're able to sit in the comfort of your own home and you don't have to take time off work, that's going to be positive. But they're also finding that the interactions they have in that smaller group are working really well as well. So to date, we've delivered, I think it's over 15,000 of these online courses now. Also, 15,000 clients have now participated in 2020, so that's very positive. With regard to our school crossing patrol service, which is one of the things that we manage, that's been sort of on and off depending on what the schools require or whether they've been open. At this particular point in time, the school crossing patrol service is stood down. However, where we are asked by schools to consider putting one in place because they have particular issues, we've been able to do that on a number of occasions. So I think we've got 3 currently operating on that basis. Community Speed Watch, which I've just outlined, again has been curtailed, particularly in this lockdown, as we require 3 people together to work as a team when they're doing that Community Speed Watch volunteer work. So that at this point in time is paused, but we hope again we'll be able to resume that as soon as it's safe to do so. And then again with our physical training, so things like Bike Safe and our training up at Scampton, that has been paused pretty much since March last year. What we have been doing is working very hard at trying to make sure that we can continue to deliver these things in a different way. So things like the Too Fast Too Soon theatre production has been completely adapted to make it COVID safe, and so when it's permissible to go back into schools, we'll be able to do that in a safe way. So again, just trying to modify what we do so that we haven't got this void of being able to provide information to people. The Forensic Collision Investigation Team, the Accident Investigation Prevention Team and the Speed Enforcement Team have all been working, again, like everywhere in the UK, slightly differently than what they had done before, but that work is essential and continues. I'll just go through a couple of the key points on the supporting data document that you might be interested in. The first few elements under the data analysis I've already gone through in the main report. But it's a comparison against 1 year. But one of the positives we saw in 2019 against 2010 was that whilst we had seen an increase in the number of people killed and seriously injured, it was much better than it had been the year before, where the increase was quite significant. So we're much more in line with what we would expect across some of our comparable counties than we had been previously, and that at figure 3B shows that previous year that I mentioned, where we were significantly higher than many of the other areas. So in terms of the killed and serious injury analysis, I mentioned before that collisions are more likely to be rural, which is indicated here, and that the percentage was the highest in East Lindsey. Also mentioned, as I said before, that the majority of fatalities tend to be male, but that also broadens out into killed and serious injury collisions as well. And on our wider dashboard, now it was a relatively small increase compared to other years, but of course we want to see a continued reduction in the number of people killed and seriously injured. And the red numbers under the percentage change on previous year, as you can see, in all but the pedal cyclist collision had seen slight increases. Where the numbers are slightly smaller, that can lead to a larger increase. But what we tend to see on the vast majority of all of these different categories is we're seeing fluctuations, and those fluctuations are outlined much more in detail further down into the data document, which you'll have all had the opportunity to look at. Just a couple of points from the fatal analysis where we go into a little bit more detail, which I always find sort of quite interesting because sometimes it surprises me. But you can see on the left-hand side there, mature adults over the age of 60 accounted for 37%, which again is clearly overrepresented in terms of the number of fatalities. But this is what I referred to before, where we do see fluctuations. And so for a lot of our fatalities, you might expect that there were some key areas that we should be spending a lot of our time focusing on, whether that be geographical in terms of the type of user that we're looking at. But things, as I say, they do fluctuate every year, which is why it's important that we have our key priorities, but we also retain the flexibility to modify what we do each year and then add in extra road user groups or vulnerable road users where it's important to do so. And it's a similar theme in terms of times of fatality. So whilst in this year you can see that between the times of 5 and 6 we saw a peak this year, when you look back over the last 3 or 4 years, those times where the peaks are highest again have changed throughout the entire day. So it means that we really wouldn't necessarily be focusing on particular areas and particular times. We need to make sure that we put our resources out across all of the times of the day. Driver rider takes up the highest casualty class, as you can see in that graphic, and the vast majority of the fatal collisions in Lincolnshire tend to occur where the weather is fine and without high winds, and that one always does surprise me, because you would think maybe that some of the adverse weather would play more of a part in the number of collisions that are occurring. In terms of the vehicles that were involved, predominantly car this year, as you can see, with motorcycles over 500 cc making up the second one. And then in terms of the contributory factors, and again this is a definition that is put on by the police officer at the time, so you have to bear that in mind in terms of context, but the highest contributory factors to the fatalities that we saw in 2019 were careless, reckless in a hurry, failed to look properly, failed to judge other person's path and speed, and loss of control. And then you can see exceeding the speed limit, distraction, and aggressive drivers then follow on. And what that demonstrates to us, not that it's intentional, but that driver error still accounts for the vast majority of the causation factors or the contributory factors for our fatal and serious collisions. We break that down a little further afterwards into the contributory factors for the different user groups, which you might find of interest. Vast majority of collisions occurring on the A-class roads, the fatalities, 33 in 2019. And then the rest of the document goes through into the KSI analysis for each of the road user groups. So my intention, if it's okay, is to pause there because you have that information. And if you have any specific inquiries about any of those user groups, I'm happy to comment on it. But otherwise, I would open it up to questions.
Sorry, I've muted myself. Sorry, I did said thank you very much, Steve, for a very interesting and factual presentation. I have noticed that members have indicated they wish to speak, and I'll leave that in the hands of the Vice Chairman, Steve Rowe, to call them in. So over to you, Steve, please.
Thank you, Bob. Councillor Strangle first.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Stephen, for a very comprehensive report. I'd just like to bring you back to page 32, which is confusing me slightly. You have half answered a question I was going to ask, but not the other one. The first one is that you give the figures for 2020 on the fatalities as 52. I just wondered why we didn't have the full rundown on 2020, but you did answer to say that you're still collating that, so I'm happy with that. But on the graph on 3.8 on your diagram, you have a red line moving down, which obviously looks like the direction of travel. But can you answer why the red line then in 2014 didn't start going back up again? Because I would assume that's what you're trying to portray here. I mean, I don't want to see the red line going up, obviously, but it does seem illogical. If this is the direction of travel on how things are progressing or not progressing, then you would expect that red line to start moving up after 2014. If you could answer that, I'd be grateful. Thank you, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Eddie. Steve?
Thank you, Councillor. When we look at all of our casualties, we're going to be looking at the longer term trends. The reason we look at the longer term trends is because it's very easy to sort of jump from one area to another. So the longer term trend will see that line declining. So it's gone less steep. But the longer that we keep reporting, then of course, if that was to continue, it would start to go up. I think that's the key issue, that it will at some point, as you've quite rightly pointed out, start to go up, and of course at that time I will obviously report that information as well.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Eddie. Next speaker, please, Steve.
Next speaker is Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, Steve, for an excellent report, because I think it was me who asked for this, because I couldn't understand why it's not been brought to highway scrutiny, because it's most important. But we're here now, and thank goodness we're going to be able to scrutinise the report. And it is a good report, very concise and complex. And because it's complex, because it's a big issue, I'd picked up the thing which Eddie had picked up, so I won't go on to that one. I'll go on to page 35, if I may, and it's about the priorities. Priorities are good, but during COVID, the traffic was lower in some areas, but business users, particularly the white van economy, has increased exponentially. Therefore, as stats has not shown dramatic reduction in line with lower traffic volumes. Isn't it clear that some driver training is required in that particular sector? And I'll ask all my questions at once, if I may, Chair. It will save time. On page 37, it's about the community speed watch. It's a very welcome scheme. I was involved at the very start, like a lot of people, and I fully supported it. I've seen many good examples, and it certainly, as a driver, it focuses driver attention to monitor the speed of your vehicle. The only drawback is that the need, and there is a need for it in a lot of areas, has not been the catalyst for installation. The clue is in the title. It does say Lincolnshire, and L is for Lincolnshire. And apart from 2 Lincoln installations, one of which I think, but not sure, was backdoor financing, Lincoln has been short-changed. Residents, when I go knocking on the doors, are not impressed by blame shifting. So let's review equitable allocation of life-saving measures initiated by the partnership and be able to trumpet the success of it across the whole county in resultant lower case accidents, road traffic collisions, and statistics of life-changing fact. We just don't want them. Next, Chairman, I might go to page 60. And that's right down the bottom end, isn't it? If I just get there, so I'm having to scroll down because I'm clever. I'm using two PC at once, and Okay, and page 60. There we are. The child statistics, and they're worrying me. Lincolnshire has got the highest child casualties according to that. This is really unacceptable. It could be your child, and we just don't want that. So we need to make some effort to focus on that, on a massive reduction on that, because children are the future. And then finally, Chair, if I may, on page 63 to 3, it's about low defective vehicles collision. I mean, this quite clearly could be down to lower traffic police enforcement, because during COVID, police got focused on other items, and certainly over the years there's been less and less traffic police enforcement because of the lack of resources. Now, whatever the reason of that is a fact. But monitoring ordinary traffic does actually identify if the police traffic stop one vehicle for say jumping a traffic light, for argument's sake, 10 to 1, there's more than one offence committed. So it is an area which needs checking, it needs improving on, because it will pick out the defective vehicles and get them off the road, because every defective vehicle on the road is a risk too far, as I'm concerned. And thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Robin. Before I ask Steve to respond, Robin, I think you should be aware that this report primarily goes to Nigel Pepper's committee, the Public Protection Committee, etc. And this is additional to this committee, and I thank Steve for doing this. This is not the prime committee that this report comes to. I think we need to bear that in mind in terms of feedback. So, Steve, do you want to respond to those points, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. The first point you raised there around our priorities, as you would expect, because of funding and ensuring that we get all of our activity planned, that we will do that at the beginning of the financial year. So we'll have long-term priorities, as I mentioned before, so things like business users, but also younger drivers and younger road users. We'll have those as long-term priorities. But I've mentioned that it's really important that we do retain the flexibility to adapt what we're doing and make sure that we are focusing on emerging trends. And I think you're absolutely right with the number of vehicles on the roads. One of the key type of road users is going to continue to be business users. So one of the biggest areas of work that we've expanded over the last few years is what we call managing occupational road risk. So what we're trying to do now is where local communities are identifying issues, for example, with businesses that work in their communities, instead of thinking about enforcement first, we're trying to actually get in contact with those businesses and go out and offer free training and interaction with them, and trying to actually look at the benefits of them driving safely that it can have on their organisation, notwithstanding the casualty benefits that we obviously want to try and see. We've gone into a wide range of organisations, be that, for example, we do a lot of work with the military. We've done things with Siemens in Lincoln, Spalding Energy down at the south. We try and do as much as we can with those business users. But I am conscious, as you've highlighted there, that this period of time, there's a couple of factors. One are business users, because they are still allowed to be out on the road. And the other one is there's many more vulnerable road users out, because one of the key areas they're allowed out for is exercise. So people on foot and people on pedal cycles are also going to be more at risk as well at this period in time. So it's really about us trying to ensure that we educate and help people to stay safe when they're going out and doing the exercise in their communities, but also about making sure those drivers that are on the roads understand the risks that are out there, both to them and to other road users, and to ensure that we have an enforcement presence, so that if those warnings and that education isn't heeded, that there is a realistic chance that they will be detected for committing those offences, and we can hopefully put them off that way as well. So I am very much aware of what you've highlighted. With regard to Community Speedwatch, share your frustration. We've certainly been working with both the communities and with Lincoln Council to try and get over the issues that we had with being able to provide community speedwatch. I, like you, think it should be available absolutely everywhere, and that's something that we are entirely committed to. It works very well in rural communities because they're often coming from single carriageway national speed limits into 30-mile-an-hour zones, so that change is quite important. But of course, in big urban areas, you're going to have a significantly higher proportion of vulnerable road users, and so it's equally as important that we can get those community speedwatch activity happening and out and about. And so it's my commitment to you today is to redouble that effort and try and make sure that we are able to expand it more than we've been able to do at this point in time. Your point in relation to child casualties, agree. I share your concern on that issue as well. What I would say is that we've done an awful lot of work in terms of analysing collisions in and around both primary and secondary schools. The issue invariably is children that are passengers in vehicles in this county. So there's a relatively low number of people who are killed and seriously injured outside of schools themselves. Now, every death or injury to a child is, of course, a huge issue and something that we are very focused on. I didn't go into all of the detail in my report because there's quite a bit, but there's a significant amount of work that we are doing, a number of different programs at each age group to try and ensure that we're passing on as much education and training as we can. But I won't call it reassurance, but there's an essence of, I think that the fact that the majority are passengers in vehicles as opposed to pedestrians is a slightly different issue, and I think that is an important distinction for us because it would be a very different problem for us to have to tackle. With regards to your wider point on defective vehicles and therefore policing, I do an awful lot of work with Lincolnshire Police. I understand the commitment from the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Officer Group of Lincolnshire Police to tackle this issue. I'm part of a road safety working group within Lincolnshire Police, the sole purpose of which is to try and ensure that all of the resources of divisions, neighbourhood policing teams and road safety officers, as well as our road safety partnership resources, are all focused and targeted as effectively as we possibly can. We also attend the force, threat and risk meetings and also their tasking meetings, again, to try and ensure that we're providing as much effective data as we possibly can. And they also provide support to our community speedwatch teams by going out and visiting repeat offenders and ensuring that those communities are supported. So I agree with you that having an effective deterrent is fundamentally important to achieving road safety success. But I'm happy to report back that it is an issue that is a high priority within the force.
Thank you for that, Steve.
Can I just say one thing, Chairman? Thank you, Steve, for that. It's some excellent answers, and it's reminded me that I'm on the right course and not thinking anti-road safety partnership and supportive of them. But just on the children, I didn't realise that the children as passengers in vehicles that were the highest statistic. I think that's more bit luck than judgment, because seeing some of the antics of some of the clown drivers manoeuvring around schools, I think it's just that the slow speed of them makes it inevitable that there are less RTCs around schools. But I think the programme of education for all of us, and I've been on several of your courses, and I think it's great, and I think it's the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Steve, next member, please.
Councillor Mark Whittington.
Councillor Whittington, Mark, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Steve, for a very good report. As I have previously seen this before, because I used to be on the Public Protection Committee, on Nigel's committee, where this used to go to. And I mean, I'm really looking at sort of the table that starts on page 51, the contributory factors, and I think it picks up on the point that you made, Steve, in your presentation, that it seems like the majority of the contributory factors, certainly in fatal accidents, are really down to driver error. And I'm looking at the numbers, and a lot of them seem to be associated with regards to speed, careless or reckless in a hurry, loss of control, which for me implies they're going too fast, aggressive driving again. I mean, we can probably all recount, I mean, certainly pre-lockdown, when I used to travel from Grantham to Lincoln up the A6 or 7, used to witness some pretty, at times, quite frightening displays of driving by certain people, either going too fast, dangerous overtaking, tailgating, all that sort of stuff. I'm just wondering, because, you know, it's fantastic that we do the sort of speed awareness training after, you know, individuals have been caught. But I'm just wondering, what can we do beforehand to get the message across that actually speed contributes to a whole lot of things? Just going too fast, aggressive driving, I think, is linked to it, and tailgating. I mean, I mourn the passing of the old public information film that some of us older people can possibly remember. I'm just wondering what we can actually do to get the message out beforehand. And I'm speaking in particular context to the Too Fast Too Soon and the Jason story play, which actually was put on at the council in committee room 1 a number of years ago. I was a bit disappointed that they only took 10 people. I think it was 10 or 12 people from both officers and members attended. I'm just wondering if it's possible to, you know, what we can do. Is it possible to expand Jason's story? I'm thinking in terms of maybe the universities. Just get the message out there to drivers that actually you by driving too quickly, by being aggressive, it lowers both your response time. It puts you probably into a frame of mind where you may be tempted to tailgate under participate in sort of dangerous overtaking manoeuvres. What can we do, Steve, before to get the message across that actually just to the drivers to slow down, take your time? If you're going to be late, fine. It's better to be late than to be dead. But what can we do beforehand to get the message across? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Steve, you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Councillor. To your first point, and I think it's fundamental, and I'm really pleased that you raised it, was that some people will often focus on excessive speed, which of course is significant, but for us it's about excessive and inappropriate speed. So all of the other contributory factors that you've highlighted there, you quite rightly state, inappropriate speed is likely to be a factor within that as well. Some people often focus on the idea that at an arbitrary number of 29 is fine and 31 is bad in a speed limit, but the speed limit is there as it's the maximum permissible speed under ideal conditions. But what we really need to try and get across to people is that there's very often circumstances where that maximum permissible speed under ideal conditions really isn't going to be appropriate for the situation in which you're faced, and so it's getting people to understand and recognize risk. And I think this is one of the most difficult challenges that we face, because the vast majority of people will go about their daily driving lives, whether that's for work or in their home lives, without facing significant issues, without being involved in serious crashes. And so it's how do you effectively convince somebody of that risk that may not happen, and say that, you know, if it does, then this is going to be the consequences. So that is a huge challenge for us. I think one of the interesting challenges for us is going to be that a lot of the groups you identify there probably use different types of media than what we would have traditionally did road safety education in the past. So it's about embracing different platforms, and it's about using, you know, online and digital content much more effectively than what we may have done in the past. So when I first started doing this 20 years ago, we would rely primarily on trying to get an education campaign as a headline in the local newspapers, for example, or going on an interview on the radio. But I think now we've got to be much more clever about the types of information we can get out on social media platforms, and direct online learning that people can get on their devices. So that's an area that we're certainly trying to improve on. We do have relationships with all of the universities and colleges within the county, but again, I think you're absolutely right. It's how can we go further and expand that more widely. But I also come back to one of the points I raised right at the beginning, and it's that for some people, they may well get their driving licence and then be able to go through their entire driving career without any further interaction. So for me, I think there's some things that we need to look at on a national level as well, around how that training is done initially, how we then maybe monitor and support drivers as they go through their driving career, particularly in those early years where that lack of experience is going to put them at a greater risk than you would hope when they're more well established and have been exposed to more activity on the road. So I don't have a specific answer as in if we do A, we will achieve B. But for me, it's very much around trying to come up with effective digital and social media campaigns that will directly target some of those younger road users. And it's about looking nationally about, how can we support and monitor the driving careers of people. Now, that might not be mandatory retraining, things of that nature, black box insurance within vehicles. There's a wide range of things that government might wish to consider. And I think we need to be there to provide the data so they consider whether that's a good thing. And then, of course, after you've done those things, we need to make sure that we have an effective enforcement strategy, because I do believe that if as a driver, somebody who is predisposed to exceed the speed limit or to ignore the law, if they do not feel there is a realistic proposition that they will get caught if they undertake that behaviour, then it's very hard to imagine them stopping. So we can educate as much as we want, but we also have to ensure that there is that punitive element for those who simply won't listen.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, because interestingly, Steve, the point you were making about that you'd expect there to be more road collisions when the weather is poor, and actually the stats don't seem to prove that, indicates to me that maybe drivers are aware of bad weather, so they seemingly can almost self-regulate themselves when the weather's bad, and can't see then in fine weather. You would mean so I think there maybe is an awareness there that from bad weather they do self-regulate, but getting the message across them that even in fine weather they need to self-regulate as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll just come back for one moment on that.
Surely.
It's a bit of a punchline, but I heard it many years ago, and it was that in a survey just after 2000, that it was in excess of 60% of people considered themselves to be an above-average driver. And I think this probably comes back to the point here is that people, I think, overestimate their skill and ability in a vehicle. We all like to take pride in our vehicles. We like to think that we are good at driving, and the problem is that invariably they will be, but it's that occasion where something is different, something is out of the ordinary. So if you're driving from home to work every day and nothing happens and conditions are okay, then I think they're just not expecting and not preparing for something to not be okay on that one occasion. So as we know, for those who are highly trained drivers, for example, police response vehicle drivers, they are practicing and training daily. The concentration levels that are required for them to operate at speed is such that they're scanning the road significantly further ahead than most people would do, but it's work. It's a tiring thing to drive very safely and be prepared to change and adapt what you're doing if somebody does something that they shouldn't. And I guess that's the challenge for us, and it's one I'm very much aware of.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Rowe, next speaker, please.
Councillor Jackie Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. A couple of comments and a couple of short questions, please. First of all, can I say this is an excellent report and very well presented, if I may say so. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you so much. Chairman, I know this isn't the prime committee for this, but I do hope we get to receive this report again. It's such a useful piece of work. A couple of comments. I was very pleased during the report that you talked about training trainers to deliver things. One of the things I have problems with is going to courses where the trainers are clearly not trained and it's death by PowerPoint. So it's very refreshing to hear that that's in your consciousness. I wonder, with regard to the mature drivers course, I haven't seen anything about that, for instance, on social media. And I wondered if it could go through comms to be put out so that we can disseminate that for you, get it out there on Facebook and the various other places, because that sounds really good. I think I might sign up for that. And just two questions then. With regard to the community speed groups, you mentioned that the people do it in groups of 3. Could I ask, do these people suffer any abuse when they're out there? And if so, what do we do about it? So that's the first question. And the second question is on page 45. I noticed that Cheshire has got very, very successful records when it comes to reducing the KSI casualties. And places like North Yorkshire, Leicester, Nottinghamshire, they're up there as well. So what are they doing to be so successful? So 2 questions then, community speed group and abuse, and Cheshire, how are they so successful? Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Jackie. Stephen?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'm very sorry to report that sometimes these volunteers do receive abuse from drivers who go past. It's something I really struggle with. These are people that are dedicated to giving up their time to try and help the communities in which they live, to try and increase and improve safety. And it's a scheme which actually there's no enforcement penalty. It's about raising awareness. It's about educating drivers. It's almost the most polite version of stopping people speeding that we can do. And so when they get their letter, it's about asking people to reform and change their behaviour. It's a collaborative approach. And so the idea that people should suffer abuse for doing that, it's worrying, and it's certainly something that we would condone. What we will do, we've set up a system whereby local neighboured policing teams and also volunteer coordinators within Lincolnshire Police are available to support those communities, so they can report any incidents and issues to them, and we can take action where it's necessary to do so. We have a community speed watch coordinator who is frequently in contact with the parishes, both via email and on the phone. And just before this, the last lockdown, we did have one incident where a community speed watch group did suffer some abuse, and I can confirm that when we notified our police colleagues, they went out, identified the driver of the vehicle, and went to their home to have a conversation with them and to consider whether any offences had been committed. So we are also committed to following up on any of those issues, because we just won't tolerate that. With regards to the issue of other areas of the county, I don't want it to sound like a cop-out, but in essence, there is no obvious and clear things that others are doing significantly different to us, which would achieve the successes, and therefore we're at risk of missing some key initiatives and some key focus. What I do make sure we do is I'm a part of the National Safer Roads conference planning committee group, which means that every year our job, or part of our job, is to scan all of the best practice that is being done across the UK and to identify those so we can bring them into our conference, and they can then present to all of the other road safety groups throughout the whole of the UK. And we're also a member of a number of regional-based groups as well, so both on the policing side and the road safety officer side, again to try and ensure that we're sharing best practice wherever we can. And I think that's the key for me. It's ensuring that we're reading the reports of other road safety organisations throughout the UK, and where we identify best practice, we then make sure we get in contact and adopt that, or at least assess what we're doing in comparison to what they're doing, and seeing if we can adopt some of their behaviours. So there is no clear and obvious in initiative or action that we are missing that is being done elsewhere, but we are also very conscious of trying to ensure that we are constantly reviewing what we do in comparison to others and adopting best practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Stephen. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Rodney Grocott.
Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Steve, for the report. Excellent service week. I've only got one question, and excuse me, I might have missed it in the figures when it was scrolling through pretty fast. But is any of these figures including prescribed and unprescribed drugs and drink in the figures? Thank you.
Stephen?
Yep, thank you, Councillor. There is one table within there towards the end. If it's okay, I won't dip back out because last time I had trouble coming back onto the screen. But there is one table in there which identifies drink and drugs as one of the issues that we should focus on. It lists the numbers. If you'd like any more information specifically on that issue, though, I can certainly make sure we can provide more information to you as well outside of this, or to the committee if they prefer.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Rodney. Steve, any further speakers, please?
Yep, Councillor Tom Ashton.
Councillor Ashton, Tom, please.
Thank you very much. I mean, I just picked up on the fine weather being statistically more likely to be when accidents are happening. I know this was discussed with Councillor Whittington's question, but I wonder whether this is as much to do with statistically there's more normal weather than there is extreme weather. So you're simply going to get an awful lot more people having their accidents then. But my main point for around the community speed watch schemes at 6.5, the fixed signs that quite a lot of communities took up as a first stage on the on their speed watch journey. Quite a lot of these I've noticed as I was driving around. I don't know whether obviously the last 12 months has made it a little bit more challenging to move those around, but I think there are some communities that have fallen into the trap of leaving them where they are. And so the effect of moving them around is now being lost, but also the age of these things, being what they are fading and beginning to look a little bit worse for wear. And I wondered whether there was any intention to go back to some of those communities and just check what they're doing with them, and if they really need some new ones. And the other thing is on the reactive signs, which again are fantastic, and I applaud the many parishes and communities that have put their hand in the pocket to buy these. In personal experience of a parish that I'm a member of, it's really good to demonstrate that while people do sometimes think that speeding is a massive problem in their village, that actually it is much more perception rather than reality. As well as being a clear aid there on the roadside. As far as I'm aware, these only do 30 and 40 miles an hour limits. Is there any means or plans or hope of getting 50 miles per hour versions of these? Because there are still areas around the county, and again, ones that are familiar to me, that would really benefit from having one in a 50, because we try as we might, the 50 miles an hour limit doesn't stack up for a reduction. But I know there are communities that would which would spend money on them, and for the same, while we're doing 50, could we do national speed limit? Because again, there are small hamlets on rural roads, which you and I would say that 60 miles an hour is not suitable, but it's national speed limit. It doesn't meet the criteria for a limit, but it does affect the people that are living there. And just on that point of national speed limits, something that comes to mind as to whether national to 30 miles per hour drops are wise. I mean, again, in my familiarity, B1192 at New York Primary School, it's a fast, straight road at 60, and you come up against a 30 miles an hour limit that's there for the benefit of the school. There's often a camera van there that I think does a roaring trade, but at the same time, is the issue the issue in places like that isn't the amount of enforcement, because the enforcement does genuinely happen. It's that straight road and a 30 miles an hour drop in speed limit, and I wondered whether I'd just be interested to know on the views on whether that's a good idea, or whether we should be looking at staggering those, at least to help give motorists a chance to get their speed down before they've zoomed past the sign and a camera van. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Stephen?
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor. I think you're absolutely right in terms of the passive signs, the yellow ones. For me, if clearly as temporary signs, if they're left on the side of the road, then they are going to weather. But I'm very conscious that if the signs don't look good, they're not prominent, they're not going to be as effective, but also they can start to look tired, then it reflects poorly on the scheme. It almost looks as if we don't care, and that clearly can't be allowed to happen. We were very fortunate that the Police and Crime Commissioner for Lincolnshire provided funding for the first round of passive signs that went out. And what we've been looking to try and do is where parishes are coming to us and saying that they've got issues with their signs, either some of them have been damaged or they've been tired, or where we've been driving through communities as a road safety partnership and we've seen signs that maybe aren't looking at their best, then we have been providing updates and replacements to them free of charge. Another thing that we've been doing is where communities who may not necessarily have been doing a lot of the community speed watch activity, which is part of the scheme, but someone has highlighted to us that they believe the risk has increased or that there's new issues emerging. When we've gone out and done our surveys to look at the data and the information, on some occasions we've then been putting extra signs in as soon as we've retrieved that survey, so that communities are feeling that they are being listened to and that we are reacting almost immediately to the concerns that have been raised. So yes, I agree, we need to make sure those passive signs do look good, otherwise they lose their effectiveness, and we are supporting communities by providing extra signs to them to try and make sure that that can happen. And I think that's an ongoing rolling process. With regards to the interactive signs, I think they are fantastic, but again, like any intervention, I mentioned in one of my previous answers about the threat of enforcement, and without that, sometimes education can lose its effectiveness. And I think interactive signs are one of those that, if we do move them around within parishes, and people therefore don't get used to seeing it and it pops up and it's that visual reminder, then I think it can be really impactful, and it's about sustaining that impact for as long as possible. So I think it's really vital and important that we continue to have those in place. Your point about 50-mile-an-hour speed limits, the scheme's been around for a while now, and I can't recollect the decision-making process at the very beginning. I'm very happy to revisit that and consider whether it would be appropriate to do them within 50-mile-an-hour speed limits. I can certainly see benefits for some of the types of communities that you've outlined, and I also believe that that it could be worthwhile, because roads that are defined as 50s are probably going to have a lot of similarities with those national speed limits, and so reducing them by that extra 10 miles an hour minimum is going to be positive. So that is an action I will take away and look into and feed back to you on. Initially, I don't see the benefit in the same way for national speed limit community speed watch signs, because there is no permissible speed above what they will be travelling at on a national speed limit road, and because we're not able to define the actual speed for that vehicle in the national speed limit, I'm not sure that it adds anything in reality. So whilst having a 30, 40 or potentially a 50 is giving a clear and obvious instruction and a reminder to them that it's less than what a national speed limit would be, having repeaters of the national speed limit, I'm not sure it would add as much. It would also be more dangerous to be erecting those signs and moving those signs around, of course, as well. So that again, I will consider that as part of the looking at the 50s, but from the outset, I'm not sure of the benefits in the same way. In terms of 30 miles an hour to national speed limits, as you'll be very aware, the assessment for whether a speed limit is put into place is based on national policy and national guidelines. And I know that we follow that within this county. I'm also conscious that there is a balance to be had between safety and moving people and goods and services, etc., around the county. And so, it's important that we make sure that those speed limits are appropriately set. I don't generally subscribe to the idea that people, for example, at New York are driving through there unaware that it's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. I think that you alluded to the issue, because of the nature of the road, they just don't feel like 30 is appropriate for them. They're making a judgment call. So I don't necessarily think there is an issue with going from a national speed limit to a 30 from a safety point of view, other than it needs to be clear and obvious. You know, we really need people to have good sightline and visibility for the signs. So that's about ensuring that the verges are maintained and the signs are cleaned and that people can see them. Where we've had problems in the past, I know that divisions within highways have worked with parishes to look at installing gateways or yellowback signs, for example. So those can all be factored in. But I think there are places where it feels higher than a 30, so people just choose not to travel at 30. I don't believe it's an issue of them not knowing that it's a 30.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Rowe, Stephen, any further speakers?
Myself, I'm the last one. I wanted to thank Stephen for coming and doing this. I know that the chairman and myself have both asked him that we can do this again next year, and pleased to say that is going to happen. I think it's a super report. I shall take an awful lot of it out to the community now the meeting is passed. The question I've got is the community speed watch training. Is there an online version for that, or have we got to wait for the lockdown to end before we can do the training?
Thank you, Councillor. There isn't an online version at this point in time, but we have been exploring how we could make that happen, because a 3-month lockdown was one thing. We couldn't do the activity, so it wasn't a huge issue. But as this continues, we are looking at what else we can do. For us, it's really important that that we get the training right and that we're comfortable and confident that people have all the information that they need and they can operate safely. Because being on the side of the highway, clearly there is a risk to people who are undertaking it. So we just need to be confident that we can deliver that effectively. But I know our Community Speed Watch has been liaising with the police volunteer trainers, and we're looking at what we can do to try and bring that training forwards.
Thank you again, Stephen. And Mr. Chairman, that's it. We have nobody else asking questions.
Thank you, Steve. Stephen, can I thank you on behalf of the committee for coming forward with this report. We know it's an extra one for you because the scrutiny committee for this particular report is the public protection one. So we won't be asking you to take back any particular recommendations, but because that is their prerogative. But I'm quite sure that you will take back and note and give considerations to the points that have been made, excuse me, by committee members here. And we do look forward to the next time you're able to come with us. Do you have any sort of thoughts on a time frame, Stephen? That is 6 months too soon, or not soon enough, or what is your view?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. My view would be that an annual report works best because we have to wait for the Department for Transport to collate all of the national figures for us to do our comparisons with other counties and with the national figures. So anytime, and that's why there's also a bit of a lag in the process again, because I would say we will have all the 2020 information and data probably done in the next week or two, but we can't make any comparisons to anywhere else in the UK until probably August, September. So if it's feasible, then I would suggest annual is probably the best. But if there are any particular issues that are highlighted by the committee, I'd be happy to come back and address those at any point.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Steve. So, excuse me, I propose that we note the report and that comments of the committee, I know Stephen will take back and give consideration to. If there is any member of the committee that is not happy with that, can they indicate in the chat box by way of dissent, please? Are there any dissenters in the chat box, Vice Chairman?
No dissenters.
Thank you very much indeed. So we move on to item 8, committee work programme. And I'm not sure whether this is in the hands of Simon or Steve Black. Oh, Simon. Oh,
yes. Good morning, Chairman. Yes, this is the work programme item. So if I can just ask members of the committee to look at the final page of the agenda, which lists the 7 items currently on the list for the next meeting. And there is also a meeting, which I think back in December, we agreed we would still keep in the diary until there was a bit more certainty in relation to the election in May. But I say I have nothing else to add to that paper, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Any comments from any member of the committee?
Nobody's asked to speak.
So can I ask if we agree the work programme, or the work programme, approve the work programme, and if there are any dissenters to please indicate in the chat box. No dissenters, Steve?
No dissenters.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the formal business of the meeting, but before we close it, I think members would, as I do, welcome the opportunity to say a few words to Steve Blagg, who is retiring at the end of this month. Steve, I've already sent you a personal email thanking you for all the kindness and wise counsel that you've given to me over the time I have been on the council. It's been very, very much appreciated. It is going to be sadly missed by me, but having said that, I'm sure all members will wish you a very happy and long retirement going forward. But you will be missed, Steve, but you go with our good wishes for the future. Steve, Vice Chairman, if there are any other members who wish to speak, would you please bring them in?
Yeah, a few cameras popped up, but nobody's actually said they'd like to speak. Sorry, yes, we have now. Councillor Brockway would like to speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to say a big thank you to Steve. When I first came to the council, Steve was assigned to be my buddy, and he's been my buddy ever since. He absolutely looked after me, and he saved me from numerous missteps along the way. So I'd really like to say a public thank you and say how much I'll miss you. But I do hope you'll keep in touch with us, Steve. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Jackie.
Councillor Brewis.
Chris Brewis.
Thank you very much. I was fortunate enough many years ago that when I first came on, Steve was my officer buddy, and I owe him an enormous amount because he taught me an awful lot of, and where I've got to is largely down to his early guidance. I too think he will be greatly missed, and I wish him all the very, very best. He's been an excellent help to all of us, the first-class officer, and I'm sure we wish him all the very best, him and his family, for the future. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Any further, Steve?
Nobody else showing other than once again myself, and I'd like to thank Steve for all his help. He's been great assistance while I've been on this committee. He's always smiling, he's always happy, and he's been a great help. So I wish you all the best for the future, and thank you very much, Steve. And I've still nobody else.
Okay, I'm sure all members of the committee share the sentiments that have been expressed, Steve, even though they might not have spoken. Do you wish to say a few words, Steve?
Yeah, Chairman, thank you, members, for their very kind words. It's been a pleasure to serve members during my time at Lincolnshire County Council. I've thoroughly enjoyed highways and also the planning committee as well, Chairman, I might add. Very practical sort of committees, right up my street, Chairman. But yes, it's been a pleasure to serve members, and I wish everybody health and happiness, and I will keep in touch. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. So on that happy note, we'll draw the meeting to a close. Please, members, stay safe, keep well, and look forward to seeing you on the next occasion. You exit the meeting by pressing the icon of the red box with the white telephone on it. Stay safe and keep well.
Bye.